time to say sorry, 'cause I'm missing more than just your body. Hey everybody, Rev Stu here with another Monday Motivator, and this week I've been thinking about all this love wins the fight stuff, because this year I'm getting to travel all over the country and share this message of how love wins the fight every time. No matter what fight it might be, love wins the fight. And I started to think about obligation versus love, things that we have to do versus things that we're motivated to do out of love. And as I was thinking about this, I actually had a dream one night where I jumped in front of a bullet for my best friend, and the dream ended with me not knowing whether I was going to live or die, and it was kind of crazy, but I was thinking, man, I would do that. I would do that for my best friend. I would jump in front of a bullet for him. Why? Not because I would have to, but because I love him. I love my best friend. And then I started to think about things that my parents do for me, or they have done for me. And one of the things, my parents actually hate wrestling. They loathe it. They don't like that I'm participating in it, but they show up and they support me. Now, my mom freaks out every single time. Sorry. But they're there anytime I ask them to be there because they love me, not because they're obligated, not because they have to. But if they were obligated to, then they would do the things that they wanted to do or the things that were necessary for my survival. But they show up because they love me, not because they love wrestling, but because they love me. And then I started to think about, well, God loves us, and because God loves us, He sent His Son to die for us. And that's so crazy that God loved us, and the Bible talks about how God loved us first. So before you ever loved God, and even if you don't love God right now, He loves you. He loved you first, and He loves you first. And so because God loves you, you can then in turn have the opportunity to love God. And so I started to think about that, and like, God sent His Son because He loves us. For God so loved the world that He sent His one and only Son. Not for God so had to, but for God so loved the world. He loved us. He loves us. Sorry. Sorry. And then I was thinking about Jesus, and Jesus gave up His life not because He had to, but because He loves us. And that's crazy to me. Like, if He was obligated, He would have stopped it. Like, He even prayed. He prayed over and over, God, if there's any other way, please take this from me. But he chose to follow through with it because He loves us, not because He had to, but because He loves us. And so I started to think about, like, man, as I experience how much God loves me, it makes me love Him so much more, but because He loved me first. And love wins that fight between love and obligation. Obligation will only take you so far. Obligation would not have taken Jesus to the cross, but love did. Love took Jesus to the cross, and love wins that fight every single time. And because of His love, now any fight we face is now completely taken care of, because love wins the fight. Sorry, and I know that I let you down. Is it too late to say I'm sorry now? So what I want you to be thinking about is, what are the things that you're doing only out of obligation to God, and what are the things that you can start to do because you can realize more and more that He loves you? And the biggest thing that comes to me is like the things that we give up and the sins that we give up and we choose to not do. Sometimes it's like, oh, I can't believe I'm giving that up. But when you realize God gave up His Son because He loves you, then whatever you're giving up pales in comparison to what He has already given up for you. So realize that God loves you so much. And as you realize that God loves you, you can start to love Him more. And as you start to love Him more, it won't be out of obligation, because when push comes to shove, obligation will only take you so far. There are some things that will entangle you, and there are some things that will hold you back, and there are some sins that you will choose over obligation. But out of His love, if you start to realize that God loves you more, and that makes you love Him more, then there is no sin that can beat that. Love wins the fight every single time. Well, I know that I let you down. Is it too late to say I'm sorry now? obligation and more about just loving him and not wanting to do anything that would hurt him. And love will win the fight. I hope this has been a great Monday motivator for you. Just remember, love wins the fight every single time. I'll talk to you again very soon, homies. Peace. Sorry, but I know that I let you down. Is it too late to say I'm sorry now? I am already directionally challenged, and I have now ended up 20 miles out of the way because I was too busy jamming and talking in the car. I missed my exit. So, yeah, if you're directionally challenged, don't GoPro and drive. That's all I have to say about that.